In this video, we will discuss welding procedure specification, which is also known as WPS. So let's get started. So what is welding procedure specification? So a welding procedure specification is the formal written document describing welding procedure which provide direction to the welder or welding operator for making sound and quality production weld as per the code requirement. So it is a formal written document which will tell the welder how to perform the weld. So it will contain all the information about the welding, and those information is according to some standards like ASME standard. So your WPS document will contain all the information like the information related to the base metal, then the type of joint, the type of filler metal, the type of consumables, that is shielding gases. So it contains all the information about the welding that you are going to perform. So we will discuss in detail what are the parameters of welding procedure specification. So the first parameter, that is base metal and applicable specification. So it will contain the information about the base metal. So give the chemical composition. So it will have the information, that is chemical composition of your base metal. Then indicate condition of a base metal before welding. That means what type of base metal you are using, whether it is normalized, analyzed, annealed, quench, tempered or solution treated. Means whether it has gone through heat treatment process before to the welding, that also you have to mention. Then the fabricator must know the identity of all material, that is the rolling direction of the plate should be identified. That means the welder should know all the information about the base metal. Then the welding process, that means which welding process you are going to use for welding the component. So there are different welding processes like oxyacetylene, shielded metal arc welding process, gas metal arc welding process, flux core arc welding process, gas tungsten arc welding process, submerged arc welding process, ESW, SW. So these are different welding processes. So you have to mention which welding process you are going to use to weld two different component. Either you can use a single welding process, or you may use 2 or 3 different welding processes to join the component. Then the type, classification and composition of filler metal. So it should contain the information about the filler metal. So what kind of information? That is the composition of the filler metal, its chemical composition, then its classification, then the designation of filler metal. It also include size of the electrode, that means what kind of electrode you are going to use. Suppose you are performing welding with the help of GTAW, so it must contain the information about the tungsten electrode that you are using. Suppose you are using GMAW process, so it should use the information about the consumable electrode. Then the storage requirement, like storage requirement, low hydrogen electrode requires a dry, that means 120 degrees Celsius. So how you are going to store your electrode before the welding, that also you have to that information you have to provide in your WPS. Then the type of current and the current range, what kind of current you are going to use, whether it is AC or DC. If it is DC, then DCRP, that is nothing but your direct current reverse polarity, or DCSP, that is nothing but direct current straight polarity. So that you have to mention. Then current range should be listed for each of the welding variable. So if you are performing welding through number of passes, then for different run you may use different voltage and current, so that also you have to mention. Then the position of weld, thickness of the plate, then size of the electrode, that also you have to mention. Then welder qualification requirement. So the information about the welder, that also you have to mention in your document, that is welding operator qualification. Then make reference to the applicable welder qualification specification. So it will contain all the information about the welder. Then joint design and tolerances. So it will contain the information about the joint. So you can join the two different plate either with the lap joint, butt joint, corner joint, edge joint, then T joint. So the information related to joint, that also you have to provide in your WPS document. So indicate joint design detail as well as welding sequence. So all the information about the joint and the sequence of welding. Then use sectional sketches that shows the thickness of the metal and the details of the joint, or refer to the standard drawing or specification. Then you have to provide all the tolerances related to all the dimensions. Then joint preparation and cleaning of the surface for welding before or after the welding or cutting. So joint preparation, that means sometimes the beveling is required if the thickness is more. So you have to provide all the details about joint preparation. Then cleaning of the surfaces. So before welding the component, you have to clean the component. So that details you have to provide. Then joint welding details, that means the current at which you are performing the welding, size of electrode, sequence of passes, view limitation, all this information you have to provide in joint details. Next, preheat and interpass temperature. So sometimes we have to preheat the metal before welding. So at what temperature you want to preheat the metal, that you have to mention. Then interpass temperature, that means you are performing the welding in different passes. So what temperature you want to maintain in between two passes, that also you have to mention. Then pinning. So a short pinning is done to relieve the stresses of welded component. So that information you have to provide in your WPS document. After that, the heat input. So for heat input, there are three variables like welding current, welding voltage, and welding speed. So all the information related to this parameter, that means at what current you want to perform the weld, at what voltage, and what is the travel speed of your welding torch. So that information you have to provide under heat input parameter. Then the root preparation prior to the welding from second side. So actually, while preparing the joint, the bottom part of the joint is known as root. So either you can use a same welding process for welding entire component, or you can join the two component at the root by one welding process, and other passes by different welding processes. So the root preparation, that you have to mention. Then the removal of weld section for repair. So suppose after performing the root pass, again you want to perform welding from the back side. So what is the removal procedure, that also you have to mention. Then repair welding, that means give the details of any repair welding method and procedure. So suppose you want to perform the welding for repairing the component, so that information you have to provide in your WPS document. Then the examination. So after completion of weld, you have to test the component. So for that there are different examination methods. So that also you have to mention in your WPS document. The different examination methods like radiography. Through radiography you can check whether the joint is sound or not. Then there is other test, that is magnetic particle inspection test, or visual inspection test is also there. So what kind of examination you are going to perform after welding, that also you have to mention in your WPS document. Then post heat treatment. So after welding, again sometimes the post heat treatment is required. So what kind of heat treatment you are going to perform, the description of that heat treatment you have to mention in your document. Then heat treated alloy steel should not exceed. So these are some information about the heat treatment. So the information about the heat treatment, that you have to mention in your WPS. Then marking. So marking is also very important. These are helpful during the welding to the welder. So the identification marks, they must be made near to the weld itself. then ID marking made with low stress steel die stamp. So the information related to the marking, that also you have to provide in your WPS document. And final one is record. So it indicates detailed record of the welding joint. So these are the parameters that you have to mention in your WPS document. Now we will see how the WPS document look like. So this is an example of WPS. Here you have to mention the name of your client. So here the name of the client is Mobile. Then the project. So obviously you will have some project number. Then the reference number. So you can take earlier WPS document as a reference. So that you have to mention here. Then procedure description. Then the date. Then the material, what kind of base metal you are using, diameter, thickness, so the information related to the base metal. Then position, so here it is 6G, that means what position you are going to use. Then clamp type, how you are going to clamp it. Then preheat, so here it is mentioned 100 degrees Celsius, so this is preheat temperature. Then interpass temperature, that is 300 degrees Celsius. Then which welding process you are going to use for root, hot passes and filler and cap. So here we are using SMAW for all these operation, that is root, hot pass and filler cap. Then the welding direction, so here we are using vertical down. Then what kind of filler you are going to use, so here it is L Incon L SA70 plus, whereas for whereas for fill and cap it is Bowler BVD90M. So the type of filler you are going to use, that also you have to mention. Then polarity, so here they are using DC positive. Then shielding gases, that also you have to mention. So it is not applicable here because we are using SMAW process. Then purge gases, this also you have to mention. So here you can see the details of the joints, the diagram of the joint. So this is your plate 1, this is plate 2, this is the root portion. So everything about the joint that you have to mention with the help of the drawing. And here you can see the number of passes, 1, 2, fill and cap, and the relative current, voltage, speed, heat input. So that also you have to mention here. And how you are going to perform the weld in various passes, this also given here. Okay, and again you can mention some important notes here. So here you can see what kind of standard you are going to follow. Then the clamp removal stage, how you are going to remove the clamp after welding. Then the time lapse between the root and second pass. So the time lapse between the passes, that also you can mention here. Then the method of cleaning, so what kind of cleaning method you are going to use, whether you are using a wire brush or grinder. Then the method of preheat, so you can use gas torch for the preheat method, that is preheat the material. So at the end you can see here it is approved by your company welding engineer. So the WPS document is approved by company welding engineer and it is approved for the client. So this is all about your WPS, that is welding procedure specification.